conclude the discussion topic, Can Machines Create Art?, with a lecture by Professor Ahmed Elgammal. He was nominated this morning by Holger Volland. He is the founder and director of the Art and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory and a professor of computer science at Rutgers University. Dr. Elgammal's research on knowledge discovery in art, history, and AI art generation received wide international media attention, including reports on the Washington Post and the New York Times. Finally, I should also mention that Professor Elgammal is also an artist, and his art has been shown in several art venues in Los Angeles, Frankfurt, or New York. By the way, allow me to remember that now in the US it's early morning, so I have to say a special thanks to Ahmed Elgammal to be ready now for his presentation. Dr. Elgammal, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you everybody, and thank you for inviting me for this event. I wish in other times I would have been with you. Unfortunately, I have to be remote. But it's a pleasure to be there. I listened to the panel before me. It was totally insightful. And I hope that I can contribute something here that's kind of complete and give some answers, not full answers for what's happening. All right, so what you see actually behind me in the background is actual a virtual art exhibition that's happening right now with 6 artists. Some of them are traditional artists who have been using paint on canvas for a long time, and some of them are basically new media artists using technology for a long time. And all of these artworks has involving AI in the process. So basically, the main common ingredient here is AI is being used in the process of making this art. And each artist comes with totally different concept, totally different idea, and a great work out of that. And that's my topic today. How can AI actually be used as part of the process, and what that process should look like? So let me basically start my slides here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about AI as an art collaborator in particular. And to let us understand this a little bit more in the context, obviously, we're all aware of how art has progressed. I'm not talking about art, I'm talking about basically how creating still images have progressed in history, from the time of cave painting all the way to Renaissance, all the way to 19th century when the camera was invented, and that was the first time a device can really capture the world on canvas, which was the role of art until that time. And then 100 years later, photography had been accepted as an art form, and then came last century digital photography that we now all use to make images all the time. Came software that makes us manipulate these images, lots of software that can do that. Came graphic rendering, and now we are entering the age of AI being used to generate images from data or from other sources. So what that makes in creating images, and how that can be used in art and design and other domains in general. Obviously, making an image doesn't make it an art. Making an image is something different from making an art. All right, so obviously, using AI in making art is as old as AI itself. So in the left here is Harold Cohen and his AI machine robot, basically, that helped him, collaborated with him in making art. And he's one of the pioneering artists who have been using AI, but he's not the only one. There's other artists as well, like Lillian Schwartz, who's a computer graphics pioneer, and also have tried to use AI in the process. However, at that time, AI was mainly rule-based systems. You required to write a lot of code, a lot of constraints, and a lot of hard coding of what you want to do. Until 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when AI has evolved a lot to becoming more generative, and that breakthrough happened because some AI algorithm called GANs. Probably somebody have mentioned this today, but GANs basically work by two AI components. One of them is a generator or an artist, basically, in that case, who generates random images totally, because he's blind, he doesn't know anything about what trying to generate. Suppose you want to generate flowers, and that generator doesn't know anything about flowers. So just generate random images and give it to a critic who has access to images of flowers. And then that critic will tell that generator that's not a flower what you give me, it's just random images, and then the generator will try to improve that, and going through many iterations, the generator will start to improve. So you can see here how the process actually evolved from random to generating something that looks like a flower. So this process came around 2014, and obviously has many applications, but have been a lot of research in improving these GANs and make it better. And one of the first thing happened after that is that some researcher and some creative technologists have tried to use it to make art, and try to figure out how can this be used to make art. And here's one of our experiments to show what kind of aesthetics this kind of AI was giving us. I call it the aesthetics of machine failure, because here, for example, in that example at the top, we give these kind of machines images of classical portraits from the last 5 centuries, Western art. And what it gave us. Basically, what we see here is a kind of a deformed portraits. What happens here is the machine actually fails in making portraits that looks like what we give it, or simulate what we give it. Ultimately, when you do this experiment, you expect the machine to give you a fake portrait, but it looks like a portrait. But here it kind of has some kind of failure. But from this failure come the aesthetics, and that's what can be interesting to artists or some artists. What kind of that's a kind of surprise that the machine gave me in failing to achieve the task. In some sense, it reminds us of Francis Bacon famous deformed portraits, with a fundamental difference that Francis Bacon has the intention of making this this way, while the machine actually just failed to achieve the target, and from that failure came the aesthetics. And but AI has evolved a lot, and this kind of GAN model have evolved a lot to make photorealistic photos, fake faces like that, or fake flowers, fake birds. Even you can enter text and it give you this text. So there are a lot of advances in AI that makes this more photorealistic and more appealing. So between this look, this uncanny look, and between this photorealistic look, what artists can use, how that can be useful for artists. I just want to point a little bit about autonomous art generation. This is some experiment we have done 3 years ago at Rutgers, at the lab at Rutgers, where basically we thought, okay, if we give this machine all art history, or big sample of art history, what it will generate, and would that be art? Obviously not, because what it will generate is something that what I showed, like these deformed portraits. Even if it succeeds to make art that looks like art history, that's not art. That's basically going to be an emulation of art. So how to push it to make it to be more like an artist? So we developed a variation of GAN, we call it CAN, Creative Adversarial Network, where we really focus on, can the machine learn the aesthetics and learn what happened in art history in terms of art movement, and now generate something that follows the aesthetics, but in the same time doesn't repeat existing art history and existing art movement. Try to be creative in generating something new, and by formulating the problem this way, a big shift happened in the quality and of the generation, to the point that when we show this to a human observer mixed up with art by human, they cannot tell whether this is art by an artist or art by the machine, basically a Turing test. However, this is not the topic I want to talk about today. I want to mainly talk about artists using AI. And obviously in the last 3 years have been a lot of validation of AI and debate actually about AI role and in art. And we have seen exhibitions showing art and AI, including our own exhibition back in 2017. The Christie sale of an artwork, a couple of art fairs. We have shown in our work in a couple of art fairs in Miami and others. So that we have auctioned some artwork by Mario Klingemann. The Barbican Center in London have an exhibition in summer of 2019, last year, was basically about AI art. The National Museum of China in Beijing have an exhibition about art and science that involves several works with using AI, and about 1 million people visited that exhibition in 1 month. And so forth. There have been many of these. So it's becoming basically accepted now that artists use AI, and that's part of what accepted as art. It's still debated, but some sort of accepted. So what I'm trying to do is really answer this question: what artists can do with AI, and how artists can use AI? Will artists use AI in their work, and why not? What is the artist's role in this process, and what is the AI role? How artists will integrate AI in their process, how they will integrate it in their medium, and what artists think of AI. So I'll try to answer this question as much as possible from what I have seen. And in order to do that, basically we developed a platform called Playform. So Playform is a platform that we developed really to enable artists to use AI in making their own art. And there was a comment in the previous panel about that. Basically, what we found is that obviously most of AI available comes from big corporates like Google and NVIDIA and Facebook and Amazon. And the artists are not in mind when this AI is being developed. There is a big problem when it comes to artists using this kind of technology. They have to navigate through a lot of AI jargons, have to navigate through all the new advances coming every day, have to have access to GPUs, like some of the panelists mentioned, which is very expensive and not easy to do. Have to know how to run code, how to download a code, how to set up environments, run a code, how to install lots of code libraries. It's totally hard process, even for an expert like myself, if I want to really run something that just released by NVIDIA or Google, and I want to use it. It's not that obvious at all. So that's why we created Playform. Actually, if you go to GitHub, which is a good code repository for open source code, and just search GAN on that site, you're going to find that was a couple of months ago about 33,000 results of all variant of GANs, variant of codes of GANs available, and this number just keep increasing. So even as an artist, how can you start? Even if you can code and you can have a little bit of knowledge about coding, how even can you start? So that's really one of the problems. So moving forward, basically, this is a quote from one of AI artists using Playform. Basically say, Playform makes it possible for me to explore using AI without having to get a second degree in computer science, which for me, I mean, really the ultimate success to enable this kind of interaction. So what at the very basic level, in terms of techniques, what AI can do. Basically, the very fundamental thing of GANs, as I mentioned, is that you can give it lots of images of something and try to create more of that or simulation of that. So creating basically visual assets inspired by a certain collection. And I'm talking about the basic technical ways that artists can integrate AI into their process. And then we'll go to a more conceptual level after that. So the very basic idea is that an artist would give the AI some bunch of visual assets, images, and try to create more of that with variations. This is a very basic technique now. It can be used. Another thing is an artist can give the AI a bunch of photographs or images and try to basically abstract this, try to create abstraction based on another collection. So I like color field painting, and I want to abstract this in a way of color field painting, for example. So you can create more of abstraction with certain color palettes. Artists can mix artworks of different sources to create something conceptual. For example, here artist Carla Ganes from NYU try to create cat cyborg. So she plugged in images of cats and images of cyborgs, and basically based on that, she created AI enabled her to create cat cyborgs. Or basically define your own style and stylize a collection of images. So here, for example, plugin shells and plugin fauvism art, and doing that, basically you can stylize your shells into this fauvism-like style. So creating pattern, for example, feeding images and using AI to create lots of patterns. So anyway, there are a lot of things that at the very technical level, AI can be used in the process of making art. From getting inspiration by uncanny, surprising images to actually repeating a process that's more repetitive and make the machine creating more assets for you and maybe colorize images for you and things like that. Lots of things that can be done. So what is the artist role and what is the AI role in this process, the human-machine creative process? So in these generative models, these GAN-like models, basically the artist role is curating what data it gives to the machine. So the images here or the data becomes more like the material, the paints you give it to the machine. This is the material, the raw material. So there's a sort of pre-curation here, and that depends on the concept you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. Then you have to tweak the algorithm depending on your level of sophistication, choose the algorithm you're going to use, tweak it. And the AI will give you lots and lots of results. So if you are happy with these results, you're going to basically post-curate from that to involve in your project. Or if you are not satisfied, then you have to iterate again. So it's a creative process here where the AI really role is generating things for you, and with an element of surprise, element of variations that can really lead the work even in a new direction, as you're going to see. And all that actually is part of a bigger art project that an artist have in mind. Artists always come with this with a concept. They have a concept in mind and they're trying to execute it using AI. So let's now look at different examples of how artists integrating AI in their medium. So here is an example by an artist, Divian Garakanian from LA, who worked with us a couple of years ago. And he's trying to do a mural about Charlie Chaplin. So he fed the machine images of Charlie Chaplin and try to use the AI to abstract and to realize these kind of images. And at the end, this was printed, the outcome was printed on aluminum. Another example, artist Mario Santini from New York, who in that case tried out with AI several experiments, and at the end, what he liked is basically the fact that the machine can learn a style and apply it to photography. So he teaches the machine his own style, he fed the machine his own artworks, and now the machine can stylize his own photography and make it in his own style. So basically the machine here becoming more like an workshop assistant working for him, trying to do things for him. And then at the end, he printed this on canvas, and on top of it, he painted over with these markers to give it more of his own hand signature. So it's as you see here, the process becomes more and more complex about how artists use the machine and complement what the machine gives them. Here's my favorite example, artist Anne Spalter. Anne Spalter is basically a new media artist, very known for her work in the last 30 years or more. And she used technology all the time. And when she used AI, she found it so amazing, the kind of inspiration the AI give her. But in the same time, the images are very small, what the AI usually give the artist. You cannot really print them in large scale. So she ended basically actually painting that herself using Bastille on canvas. And what's amazing about that is she was telling me that this is the first time in 25 years she actually go back and use brush and canvas to execute her work. And that's amazing that the AI pushes the artist to actually inspire the artist and push the artist to actually execute the works back on canvas. So it's really an inspiring interaction. So here are some of her work, and this is her work here on the right on the the Spring Break Art Fair in NYC last spring, where actually all these are painted on canvas. And here she makes an inflatable, and that was Spring Break LA in the spring also. And that inflatable is outcome of the AI as well. So you can see here the artist using AI as a source of inspiration of the work, and also to integrate it into physical objects. And she make a book out of these results. Here's another example, artist Kinza Najm. Basically, artist Kinza Najm is concerned about humans and the spaces they occupy and how much space you occupy. And her artwork is more about taking these photographs of people at different places and try to abstract them, put them in different mediums. And at the left here is some of her actual artworks on canvas, which she fed to the machine. And the machine makes a lot of iterations and try to basically see how the machine would see that artwork. And this is some of her results. And the way she described it is that basically the machine give her another pair of eyes that can look at her work in a very different way from any other human can look at the work. So it's basically an interpretation. The machine is interpreting her own artwork in a different way, and that's what she likes. She showed that work in the exhibition in the National Museum of China last November, where basically you can see how the body evolved, in the interpretation of the human body evolved by the machine occupying different parts of the space. Back to artist Carla GANs from NYC, New York University, NYU, where she actually make an avatar having the name Carla GAN compared to her name Carla GANs, and in social media she started putting her own work and that avatar virtual person work using AI and based on her own inputs, of course, and try to see the reaction between her and her avatar. Obviously, I'm very much simplifying this concept. We have a talk by her on YouTube. You can check it out to more in depth about what she's doing. Here is an example of what she was doing, where basically she integrated the AI generation into a virtual reality environment. So here it's a very complex virtual reality environment, and all the texture map you see in the background, even that canvas here that that avatar is painting, all this is AI generated. So basically, the artist really using the AI as a part of a bigger component. Okay, so let me just move forward. All right, so let me talk about this exhibition that we just showed you in the beginning. It's called A Dream Within a Dream, and it involved works by 6 artists, Anne Spalter, Carla GANs, Patrick Litchi, Kinza Najm, Tesla Mir, and Travis Leroy Southworth, and created by Jessica Davidson. So this is a tour in that exhibition. This is the work by Anne Spalter, about Hoffman colorization of aeroplanes, and obviously you can understand why aeroplanes now. Work here in that wall in the right by Patrick, trying to understand how the machine understands inscription of Japanese language. Work by Carla GANs here on that wall from one of her series, Travis, and Tesla Mir here. This is just an example, and Kinza human body works are here. Okay. Now I'm just going to conclude by these couple of slides about what we learned from this so far. So we have a paper actually that we published in Art Nodes a couple of months ago called Artist, Artificial Intelligence and Machine-Based Creativity in Playform, where we actually described this experience and we interviewed 4 artists to understand how AI have helped them and how they use it. This is some quotes from the paper that I find interesting. Artists understand AI as a major impetus to their own creative process in allowing them to generate lots of images very quickly and suggesting new paths of manipulating and disruption of data to create images. So you see here generation of ideation, basically lots of images very quickly, suggesting new paths, which inspiration, and using data as a material. These are the main ingredients. For them, it's a vital step in leading them to seeing their own artwork differently, which is another component of how artists think of machine. It's basically a way for them to see things differently. Artists describing the relationship to AI as a partnership, believing there is a real value and potential in pursuing that model. The biggest gain are to be found in creative inspiration and creative volume. I conclude by saying that our relationship to computational system as human being is only going to become more critical, and that artists need to understand that relationship, be involved in it, developing a literacy, and hopefully shaping this relationship. Thank you.